My name is Gabriella. On my wedding day, my mother called. Go ahead and marry your mechanic. This family won't humiliate itself in public. The words hit like cold glass, but instead of crying, I laughed and sent a photo. Minutes later, my phone lit up with panicked calls. They had no idea the man they dismissed was holding a truth strong enough to shake their empire. Have you ever been rejected by your own family simply because your choice went against their wishes? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because right after this, I'll tell you about my journey from the day I was cast out to the day the truth forced them to bow their heads. I was born and raised in Connecticut in a family that, from the outside, looked perfect. My parents ran a prestigious real estate corporation and were considered one of the most influential families in New England. Our home wasn't just a house. It was a mansion sitting on more than 3 acres with sprawling rose gardens, a sparkling blue pool, and classic brick walls designed by a renowned architect. To outsiders, it was awe-inspiring. The Williams family truly has it all. But if they had lived behind those doors, they would have seen a different truth. Everything was measured by status, appearances, and glittering social gatherings. Inside that house, I always felt like a background character. My sister Madison, 2 years younger, was the shining jewel my parents tirelessly polished. Madison had the poise of a natural-born debutante, a radiant smile, graceful movements, and a way with words that made adults nod approvingly. She has the gift of society, my father often said proudly, his eyes gleaming whenever he spoke of Madison. As for me, I loved books, learning, and had no interest in cocktail parties or shallow greetings. To my parents, that made me dull. She buries her head in books. No one cares about that type of girl, my mother once told her friends right in front of me. I pressed my lips together, pretending not to hear, but those words etched themselves into my memory. The favoritism began with small things, then grew clearer. I remember in 3rd grade, I brought home a report card with straight A's. Excited, I placed it on my father's desk, hoping for a hug or at least a word of praise. He glanced up for a few seconds, nodded, and said, "Good. Keep it up." Then he turned back to his $1 million contracts. That same year, Madison came home with B's and C's. My parents took her out for ice cream, bought her a new dress, and told her, "What matters is that you tried your best." I stayed in the corner of the living room, swallowing the lump in my throat. Those cuts deepened as we grew. If I spent my evenings in the library preparing for exams, Madison was chauffeured to glamorous parties. If I wore a simple dress I had saved up for, Madison appeared in designer clothes from shopping trips in New York with my mother. My 16th birthday is a memory I will never forget. I had dreamed of it since childhood. A sweet 16 party with friends, a sparkling dress, and maybe for once, being the center of my parents' attention. But that morning, all I found on the breakfast table was a white envelope. Inside was a pre-printed happy birthday card and a $50 bill. No handwritten note, no party, no hug. I forced a smile, whispered thank you, and quietly tucked it into my wallet. 3 months later, it was Madison's turn to turn 16. The whole neighborhood witnessed a bright red BMW convertible roll into the driveway, a giant bow on the hood. My father placed the keys in her hand, his face glowing as if he had gifted her a golden future. Cheers from her friends, confetti exploding while I was on the steps, hands clenched white. My mother noticed my expression and leaned in to whisper, "Sweetheart, your sister needs a car to get around, to build connections. But you're happiest in the library, aren't you?" In my parents' eyes, I was never enough. Not pretty enough, not social enough, not enough to make them proud. And it wasn't just about material things. It seeped into every look, every word, every introduction. At large parties, my parents always presented Madison first. "This is our youngest daughter, she has such artistic talent and she's so good with people." As for me, they brushed off lightly, "Gabriella is a good student, very responsible." Once I overheard my mother talking with a close friend. The friend praised me, "Your eldest is so well behaved and smart. You must be proud." My mother laughed, sipped her wine, and replied, "She's diligent, yes, but honestly nothing remarkable. Madison is the true future of this family." That night, I lay in bed with the blanket pulled over my face, crying silently as if I were invisible. Those moments shaped me, turning me into someone who constantly craved recognition, desperate to prove my worth. But the harder I tried, the harsher the truth became. To my parents, I would never measure up to my sister. Gradually, I stopped hoping. I threw myself into studying as an escape. I read hundreds of books: economics, history, philosophy. I joined academic clubs, spent evenings in the library instead of at parties. In that world, I found a sliver of peace. But even when my achievements outshone Madison's, my parents never changed their view. When I won the state's top student award, they attended the ceremony but left early for a charity gala. My father patted my shoulder, saying quickly, "We already heard your speech at home. No need to stay. Please understand the foundation is giving a big donation tonight." I forced a smile, but inside I felt a vast emptiness. Every time I was overlooked, pushed aside, I was reminded that my place in the family was only a shadow behind my sister. Madison always had the glitter, and I learned to settle for what I earned on my own. Those memories, though years have passed, still feel like yesterday. And from that childhood clouded by favoritism, I grew up with a determination. One day I would live a life free from their approval. When I decided to introduce Ethan to my family, my heart was a mix of fear and hope. I had scheduled it a week in advance, preparing myself for them to finally know a part of my life that mattered. Ethan was nothing like the men they expected me to date. He didn't wear tailored suits or come from a prominent family. But with him I found peace, a love that no luxury car or grand party could ever give me. That evening, Ethan wore a navy shirt and simple khakis. He waited at the gate holding a bouquet of white tulips, knowing they were my favorite. I looked at him and smiled softly. "Are you sure you want to go in?" He squeezed my hand, his warm brown eyes steady. "Gabriella, you matter to me. I want them to know that." We stepped into the grand living room with its marble fireplace and crystal chandelier reflecting on polished walnut tables. My father was reading the newspaper, my mother sipping red wine, while Madison lounged on her phone. "Dad, Mom, this is Ethan," I said, steadying my voice. "He's my boyfriend." My father looked up, his cold eyes scanning Ethan from head to toe. He didn't stand, only frowned. "Boyfriend? And what does he do?" Ethan stepped forward, politely offering my mother the bouquet. "Sir, ma'am, I own my own garage. I specialize in car repairs and engine maintenance." The room fell silent until Madison burst into mocking laughter. "A mechanic?" She tilted her head, her eyes sparkling with sarcasm. "Well, I guess you'll never have to worry about your car breaking down again. Or maybe he'll fix your heart when it breaks too." Heat rushed to my face. "Madison, that's enough." I snapped, my voice trembling with anger and shame. My mother took the bouquet and set it aside as if it were a cheap decoration. She smiled, but the forced smile only made the atmosphere heavier. "Gabriella, are you serious? A mechanic?" Her voice was gentle, but each word pierced like a needle. "Do you know what our friends will think?" Ethan squared his shoulders, eyes unwavering. My father folded the newspaper, sighed. "I had hoped you would at least choose someone with a future worthy of you. A man like him." He glanced quickly at Ethan. "Can he even support a family?" I couldn't hold it in, my hands clenched until they turned white. "Dad, Mom, he's intelligent, hardworking, and above all kind. He loves me and I'm happy with him. That's what matters, not a business card or a bank account." "My daughter," my father scoffed, "love doesn't pay the bills. Think about it, when our friends ask, 'What does your son-in-law do?' What should I say? 'Oh, he fixes cars in a little garage.' Do you want me to lose face?" Those words made my chest tighten. Each one felt like a verdict, dismissing everything I felt for Ethan. Madison remained there, arms crossed, smirking as if she were watching a good play. Ethan turned to me, gently squeezing my hand as if to say, "I'm fine." But I knew he was hurt. I drew a deep breath and faced my parents. If you can't see his true worth, then I have nothing more to say. I endured a childhood of comparisons and being cast aside. I won't let my love be treated the same way. My mother slammed her glass of wine on the table, her voice sharp as a blade. "Gabriella, you need to be rational. Don't ruin your future over a reckless moment." "I've never been clearer," I answered firmly. "I choose Ethan." I saw the shock in my father's eyes, my mother's feigned disappointment, and Madison's mocking grin. But in that moment I saw more clearly than ever. This was the first time I had made my own choice. When Ethan and I left the house, the air outside was biting cold. I heard the door slam shut behind us, like the end of a chapter. Ethan draped his coat over my shoulders, his voice warm. I'm sorry. I never wanted you to have to choose between me and your family. I looked up at him, tears brimming but steady. Ethan, I've already chosen. And I don't regret it. We walked into the quiet night, dry leaves crunching beneath our feet. It finally felt like I'd stepped out of the gilded cage my parents built. But I also knew this choice would open a battle like no other. When we officially held our small engagement party, I still hoped my family would give me a chance. I sent proper invitations politely, wishing my parents would come, if not with joy, then at least with respect. But that evening, just as Ethan and I began our toast, the door opened. My parents walked in, followed by Madison in a dazzling dress, her eyes shining as if she were the star of the event. All the guests looked surprised. I held my breath, thinking maybe this was a sign of reconciliation. But no, the next words from my father tore that fragile hope apart. From this day forward, we're not tied to your decisions anymore, Gabriella, he said loudly, his voice echoing through the hall. If you want to spend your life with a mechanic, then you will bear the responsibility alone. This family does not support you, and from now on we part ways. The room fell silent. I stood frozen, my hands trembling around the wine glass. Ethan stepped closer, his steady hand on my back reminding me I wasn't alone. Yet whispers spread. My God, they really disowned their daughter just because? Madison folded her arms, sneered. Sis, who told you to be stubborn? You made your choice, so deal with it. Mom and Dad don't have to shoulder your mistake. After years of comparisons and being overlooked, I thought I was used to it. But in that moment, I realized the crack in my family had become an unbridgeable gulf. After that night, the news spread quickly among relatives. Most aunts and uncles stayed silent or told me to reconsider. Some even texted thinly veiled words. Madison was the pride, while I had brought it on myself. I read those lines in the dark, tears falling onto my phone screen, blurring the words. Ethan found me, pulled me into his arms, whispered, "You don't have to endure this alone. I'll take care of you. We'll face everything together." We started with his modest savings, money he had set aside to expand the garage. Instead, he used it so we could rent a small apartment on the outskirts of New Haven. It had only 2 rooms, low ceilings, and pipes that sometimes rattled, but it was the first place I truly felt the warmth of home. I hung pale blue curtains I bought cheaply, while Ethan built wooden shelves to hold little potted plants. We called it our starter nest. Planning a wedding on a tight budget was a challenge. I once dreamed of a grand day with a string quartet, crystal chandeliers, and a custom gown from a famous boutique. But reality meant hours online, searching secondhand bridal shops, comparing prices, finally choosing a simple dress that fit just right. Ethan borrowed a suit from his best friend and pressed it carefully as if it were treasure. One evening, while hand-cutting invitations, I broke down crying. Ethan set the scissors aside, gently lifted my chin. "Do you regret this, Gabriella?" I shook my head, tears streaming. "Never, because of you. Never. I wish my parents could see me happy." Ethan wiped my tears, his smile tender. "Whether they come or not, you still deserve happiness. And I promise I'll do everything so you never feel alone again." His words wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket on long, uneasy nights. Days passed and we managed together. I kept working as a financial consultant at a small firm, while Ethan spent long hours at the garage. Some nights he came home covered in grease, exhausted but still smiling, handing me a warm burger he picked up on the way. I opened it, steam rising, my heart swelling with gratitude. Our closest friends, the only ones who hadn't turned their backs, helped us build a small wedding in Lisa's backyard, my college friend. We strung warm yellow lights, borrowed plastic chairs from the nearby church, and placed wildflowers from the countryside in jars on the tables. Everything was simple, but every detail was filled with love from people who truly wanted us happy. Sometimes when I looked at the empty front row, where my parents should have sat, my chest still ached. At night, I sometimes lay awake wondering, was I wrong? Do I deserve to be abandoned like this? But each morning, when Ethan settled beside me, his steady eyes on mine, I knew I had chosen right. Still, the pain of missing family lingered like a quiet scar. It didn't break me, but it reminded me the road ahead would not be easy. And perhaps that isolation was the beginning of a journey I never expected. A journey through deep loss, leading me to discover strength within my own heart. After a long day preparing for our little wedding, Ethan asked me to come to his garage, where he spent most of his time fixing cars. Usually, I would sit in the corner reading, waiting for him to finish. But that night was different. He turned off the lights early, locked the door, and led me into a small back room. On the desk lay scattered sketches, machine models, and thick notebooks. He brushed the dust off a stack of drawings and placed them before me. His voice trembled slightly, but his eyes shone bright. "Gabriella, there's something I've never told you." I looked at him, worry knotting in my chest. Honesty had always been the foundation of our relationship. I couldn't help fearing that what he was about to say would hurt me. But when our eyes met, I didn't see secrecy, only a quiet longing, as if he had waited a long time to share this. I once studied aerospace engineering at one of the top technical schools. He paused, took a breath. But when my father was diagnosed with cancer, I had to drop out to care for him. After that, I took over this garage. I had always known Ethan was smart, but I never imagined he once had another path, a promising one my parents would have praised had they cared to see it. "So," I asked softly, "you gave it all up to be with your father?" He nodded slowly, his voice calm. "My father used to say, there is nothing more noble than honoring family." At that moment, I knew I couldn't put work above it. But that didn't mean I gave up my dream. I kept researching. He opened a metal cabinet and took out an engine model with parts gleaming as if freshly assembled. "This is the project I've pursued for 3 years. A fuel-efficient hybrid engine. I've test-fitted it on a few loyal customers' cars. The result," he looked at me, eyes shining like a child showing off a new toy, "cut gas consumption by more than 40%. I reached out to touch the model, the cold metal against my skin making my heart beat faster. "Ethan, why have you never told me?" He settled beside me, his calloused hands holding mine. "Because I want you to love me for who I am, not for an idea that might bring money or fame. I've seen too many people care only about the glitter. I don't want that to happen to us." Tears welled up, but from being moved. I gripped his hand tighter, my voice choked. "I love you for you. Whether you're a mechanic or a brilliant engineer, that doesn't change." He smiled softly, a smile I'll never forget. "I know. But today I want you to truly see me, the whole of me, the dream and the sacrifices." He showed me detailed drawings, calculations, and a meticulously kept experiment log. Every page was the result of sleepless nights, of a quiet faith he had nurtured for years. I listened, proud and aching at once. Proud because the man I loved was extraordinary. Aching because my parents had never opened their eyes to see his true worth. When I asked about his next steps, Ethan shrugged lightly. "I want to perfect the prototype before approaching investors. I won't make promises until I'm certain it runs reliably." I would keep this secret with him. Not because I feared my parents would exploit it, but because I understood him. He needed a safe place where his dream was fed by trust, not by scrutinizing eyes. In the days that followed, I often went to the garage to help. When he tested the engine on an old car, I stood by, my heart thudding as if witnessing a miracle. The first time it ran smoothly, soft engine note, the fuel gauge dropping to a low level, I squealed like a child. "My God, Ethan, it really works." He laughed, wiped sweat from his brow, eyes blazing. "I told you. This is only the beginning." That night at home, I couldn't stop replaying the moment. In a small apartment with pale blue curtains and simple wooden shelves, we ate instant noodles and still felt happy. I looked at him and wondered silently, if one day my parents learn the truth, will they regret it? But I quickly brushed the thought aside. It finally felt clear. My happiness wasn't theirs to define, not even my parents'. The months of wedding prep passed in a simple but warm rhythm. Ethan and I didn't have a lavish budget, but every detail we chose came from the heart. A small garden with warm string lights, jars of wildflowers picked from the outskirts, and a favorite song playing through an old Bluetooth speaker. I thought maybe this is what true happiness is. But just when I felt everything was settling into place, a storm from the past rolled in. The first news came from a business article. My father's real estate company, Williams Development, was caught up in a lawsuit over a green urban project in Stamford. They were accused of falsifying environmental reports, putting the project at risk of an indefinite suspension. Millions of dollars in investment could evaporate in an instant. I read the article with tangled feelings. Part of me was still the daughter who once craved her parents' recognition, wanting to rush back and ask if they were okay. But another part, the one torn by rejection and contempt, whispered, "They were never there for you when you needed them. Why should you worry about them now?" That evening I told Ethan. He was quiet for a moment, then sighed, "Gabriella, I'm guessing sooner or later they'll come to you." I looked up, surprised. "Why?" A flicker of concern lit his eyes. "Because lately, a few test customers with the hybrid engine have told their friends." Rumors spread fast. Someone in real estate has already heard about the technology. And that green urban project, it needs an energy solution, a bright spot to flip the narrative. They'll think of me. In the weeks that followed, a friend of a test customer introduced Ethan to an engineering lead at Valtis. After independent validation runs, they requested a formal proposal. Ethan kept the talks quiet until the results were conclusive. A chill ran down my spine. Not because Ethan was wrong, he always saw the situation clearly, but because I knew my parents too well. To them, a person's worth was never about love or character, only about what could be leveraged. Soon after, Ethan's prediction came true. That afternoon, while I was folding ribbons to decorate for the wedding, the doorbell rang. I opened it and my heart dropped to see my parents standing there. My mother still wore a chic beige leather coat and carefully done makeup, but her eyes held tension. My father's face looked drawn, with deep lines on his forehead I'd never noticed before. "Gabriella," my mother spoke first, striving for gentleness, "can we talk?" I hesitated. Ethan stepped out from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. He took his place at my side, silent, but his steady gaze reminded me I had a choice. I nodded and invited them in. In our tiny apartment, my parents took the worn sofa. I could see they weren't used to such simplicity. My mother's eyes swept the room and my father frowned slightly at a scratch on the wooden table. "You look well," my father began stiffly. "We heard you and Ethan are having a wedding soon." "Yes," I answered briefly. "But I'm sure you won't be attending." The air grew heavy. My mother gave a strained smile. "Gabriella, don't be so harsh. We're family." I met her eyes, the old hurt surging back. "Family? When I needed you most, you turned your backs. Do you remember? At my engagement party, you publicly cut ties with me." My mother pressed her lips together and glanced at my father. He cleared his throat and got to the point. "We can't deny there were harsh words. But the company is in serious trouble now. The Stamford project is under suit, shareholders are pressing us. And," he looked at Ethan, "we heard you have a technology that could change things." Ethan kept still, hands clasped, composed. My father went on, "If that hybrid engine truly works, it could become the project's focal point. The media would shift from the lawsuit to a sustainable green vision. We could collaborate. So you're here not to apologize, not out of love. Just because the company is in crisis and you need Ethan to play savior." My mother rushed in. "That's not it, Gabriella. Of course we care about you. But at the same time, this opportunity benefits everyone. Ethan gets funding, our company is saved, and the family is harmonious again. It's win-win." I looked at Ethan. He remained calm, his gaze unwavering. After a few seconds he spoke. "Richard, Eleanor, I understand the pressure you're under. But this technology isn't ready to be used as a shield for any project. It needs time and serious testing. It can't be turned into a tool to salvage an image." My father's face tightened. "You think you can do this on your own? Without backing from major corporations, that idea will go nowhere. You should know how to seize an opportunity." I squeezed Ethan's hand under the table. He looked at me and gave a slight nod, steadying me. I drew a breath and said, "Dad, Mom, I'm not naive anymore. I know exactly what you value. But I won't let my love be turned into a tool to recoup losses. If you truly want to rebuild our relationship, start with respect, not a contract." My mother stared at me, surprise flashing in her eyes before it shifted to disappointment. My father stood, straightened his tie. "We've wasted our time. If you insist on this path, don't blame us when the family turns its back on you again." Ethan rose, his voice low but firm. "We don't need anyone's approval to live happily. But I hope that one day you'll understand. True value isn't in the size of an investment, but in how you treat the people you love." My parents left the apartment, the slam of the door echoing through the small room. I collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down my face. Ethan held me in his arms and whispered, "You did the right thing. In his embrace, I felt something a lifetime in a luxurious mansion had never given me: peace. But I also knew this was only the beginning. Once my parents knew about Ethan's technology, they wouldn't let it go easily. Our wedding ended in laughter, warm golden lights, and real hugs from true friends. When I walked into the small apartment with Ethan that night, I thought my life had finally closed a chapter full of tears. I didn't expect that a few hours later that door would open again, bringing faces I'd known my entire life, yet more unfamiliar than ever. My father, mother, and Madison were there at the door. My mother carried an enormous gift basket with French wine, a Louis Vuitton box wrapped in a red ribbon. My father held an expensive bottle of champagne, and Madison wore a fur coat, her eyes sweeping over the tiny apartment as if stepping into a foreign world. "Surprised, Gabriella?" My mother smiled, her voice soft to the point of being fake. "We came to congratulate you too." The empty front row seats at the wedding hadn't even cooled, yet here they were, as if they had never said those cruel words. Ethan brushed my hand, reminding me I wasn't alone. I invited them in, even as anger rippled through me. We gathered around the small table. The simple dinner was still there: a few leftover slices of wedding cake, cups of steaming tea. The contrast with their lavish gifts felt biting. My father spoke first, like a businessman entering a negotiation. "Gabriella, Ethan, today we can put the past aside. Family is what matters most." I gave a thin smile. "Family? Is that what you call it when you left your seats empty on your daughter's wedding day?" My mother jumped in, her voice syrupy. "We were wrong, sweetheart. But give us a chance. We want to start over." Madison arched a brow, lips pressed as if holding back a mocking smile. I looked straight at them, done hiding. "Be honest. Are you here for me or because the company is in free fall?" My father's eyes darkened. He set down his teacup, the clink sharp and dry. "Fine. Let's be direct. Then we know you have a technology project. A fuel-saving engine. If we partner with Williams Development, we can save the Stanford project. Our family can get through this crisis." "You didn't come here to apologize," I said, my voice shaky but sharp. "You came to bargain. You weren't there when I needed you most, and now you're back only because of money?" My father scowled. "You don't understand, Gabriella. This is a matter of survival. If the company collapses, hundreds of people lose their jobs. You can't be this selfish." "Selfish? All I wanted was a blessing on my wedding day. What I got was humiliation and contempt. How is that not the very definition of putting image over family?" Ethan rested a hand on my shoulder, then looked calmly at my father. "Mr. Richard, I understand your pressure. But you may not have heard the latest." All three turned to Ethan, faces tense. He rose slowly, his voice steady. "Last week, Valtis Motors officially acquired the development rights to my hybrid engine technology." I saw my father's eyes widen, his breath catch. "Valtis?" he stammered, lips trembling. "Impossible. The investment is signed, tens of millions of dollars. Valtis believes in the technology and they'll produce it at scale." My mother dropped her spoon, the metallic clang on tile harsh and ringing. Madison straightened, her usual confidence wiped clean. I knew exactly why my father went silent. Valtis was the very partner who had once rejected him, embarrassing him in front of the finance world. And now the technology in the hands of the son-in-law he'd called a cheap mechanic was funded by Valtis itself. I looked at them, the words cutting away the last illusion. "You never saw who Ethan truly is. You only saw oil-stained clothes and never saw his mind or his heart." My father lowered his head, his trembling hands on his knees. My mother looked at me, eyes wet, but I couldn't tell if it was real remorse or the shock of their power slipping. Ethan gently took my hand, his voice warm but resonant. "We don't need to partner. We already have our own path. And if someday you want to rebuild this family, start with sincerity, not a contract." That night, after my parents and Madison left, our small apartment fell into silence. The luxury gift boxes they brought still sat on the table like a question mark hanging in the air. What to do with them? I sank into a chair, head in my hands, feeling a tangle of anger, pain, and a flicker of regret. They were still my parents after all. But they were also the ones who chose to turn their backs when I needed them most. Ethan settled beside me, poured me a cup of warm water, placed it in my hands and said softly, "I know what you're thinking." I looked up, my eyes blurry. "I don't want to hate them forever. but I can't pretend nothing happened. Ethan was quiet for a few seconds, then set his calloused hand over mine, his voice low and steady. Gabriella, I don't want revenge. What I want is a real family. If they truly want to come back, they have to understand one thing. This isn't a deal and it isn't a negotiation. This is family. I nodded slightly, his words echoing inside me. Maybe this was the boundary we needed to set. No more bargaining, no more conditions. Either they learn respect or they stay outside my life for good. The next day I texted my parents first. I wrote simply, if you want a real conversation, meet me Friday evening. No business, no negotiating. On the evening we set, Ethan and I prepared a simple dinner: roast chicken, salad, and a modest wine. No expensive tablecloth, no crystal glasses. Just an honest meal. I wanted them to see clearly, I had stepped out of their world, and if they wanted to step into mine again, they had to learn to accept this. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath. My parents came in without Madison. My mother wore a simpler coat than usual, but I could still see her restlessness. My father was quiet, the arrogance was gone, replaced by a heavy, tired look. We gathered around the table. The air was so tense at first I could hear the knife hitting the plate as I carved the chicken. Finally, I set down my utensils and looked straight at them. Dad, Mom, if you truly want me back in this family, understand this. I am not a deal. I am not a project for you to invest in or exploit. I am your daughter, and the only thing I need is respect. My mother bit her lip, hands clasped together. My father drew a long breath, fighting for composure. Gabrielle, I know. I was wrong. His voice was hoarse. But you also have to understand, we grew up in a world where everything revolved around reputation and success. We thought you would suffer if you chose a different path. No. You worried about your reputation, not my happiness. When I won a scholarship, you left early for a gala. When I held my engagement party, you publicly cut ties. When I got married, your seats were empty. That isn't concern, that's abandonment. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Her tears fell, but I couldn't tell if they came from true remorse or from realizing she'd lost control. Ethan spoke, calm but firm. I don't need you to love me right away. But I need to see that you truly respect your daughter. No one should have to beg for recognition from their own family. My father fell silent, his shoulders seeming to sag. You're right. We've been blind. I looked straight at him for the first time without flinching. If you want me back, start by learning to love without conditions. Come to me because I'm Gabriella, not because Ethan has technology or because I might bring you something. Ethan placed a hand on my back, steadying me. I knew this conversation couldn't fix everything in one night. But at least for the first time I had made my boundaries clear. When autumn dropped its first yellow leaves along the little road out of the city, Ethan and I packed our things, leaving the cramped apartment where we had begun, and moved to a small house by a lake in Vermont. The house wasn't luxurious. Just a steep wooden roof with brown shingles, a front porch looking out over the glittering water, and a backyard big enough to plant a few rows of lavender. But when I stepped onto the porch for the first time, what filled my heart wasn't a sense of lack. It was peace, the thing I had craved all through my childhood in a grand, cold mansion. On the first morning there, I woke to sunlight filtering through thin white curtains, the sound of wind in the pines, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. Ethan was fussing with a loaf of bread, sleeves rolled up, smiling warmly when he saw me come downstairs. Good morning, my wife, he said, his voice still a little husky from sleep. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, resting my chin on his shoulder. We really have begun, haven't we? He turned, kissed my forehead lightly, beginning a life we chose, not anyone else. In the days that followed, our rhythm settled. I continued my remote financial consulting work. Most of my clients were small and mid-sized businesses, people who needed practical financial guidance rather than the lavish parties my father used to boast about. I found joy in helping them build sustainable plans, as if making up for all the pretense I had witnessed in the old world. Ethan devoted himself to green technology. After the agreement with Valtis Motors, he had his own lab in Burlington, about an hour's drive from home. But no matter how busy he was, he still came back every evening. Some nights he brought new schematics, set them on the dining table, and we discussed them over dinner. I didn't understand all the technical formulas, but I understood the way his eyes lit up whenever he talked about saving fuel, cutting emissions, and how the technology could change a generation. One early winter evening, as snow fell thick outside the window, Ethan set a folder in front of me. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he said slowly. "We could set up a scholarship fund for engineering students in difficult circumstances. We'll call it the Samuel Fund in memory of my father." I touched the cover, my chest tightening. I had never met Ethan's father, but from his stories I knew he was a hardworking man who taught his son that labor mattered more than any title. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I whispered. "Your father would be proud." Ethan smiled and took my hand, "Not only for my father but for people like us, people who were looked down on because our starting point didn't glitter. I want to give someone the chance I once lost." We began working on the scholarship at the start of the new year. I used my financial skills to design the fund structure and sought support from local businesses and individuals who believed in Ethan's vision. He visited technical schools, spoke directly with students, and listened to their stories. Once he told me about a freshman with a bright face but worn clothes, who said he worked at a car wash to buy textbooks. Ethan looked at me, eyes shining. "I see myself in that kid, Gabriella. If I can, I want every student like him to know their dream isn't far-fetched." I nodded, feeling his convictions spill into me. From then on, I was even more determined to make the scholarship succeed. Life by the lake wasn't without challenges. Some winter months, snow blanketed everything and the roads were slick, and Ethan had to wake at 5 a.m. to drive to the lab. Some days I spent hours with spreadsheets, worrying that the fund wasn't large enough to grant as many scholarships as we hoped. But at night, when we curled up by the fireplace, sharing worries and finding solutions, I realized hardship wasn't so frightening when you had someone beside you. One spring afternoon, as the lavender in the backyard began to bloom, I received an email from the first student awarded a Samuel Fund scholarship. He wrote, "Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I'll work hard so I can come back and help others, the way I was helped." I read it aloud to Ethan, eyes brimming. He pulled me close and murmured, "This is why we do all of it." Looking around our small house, hearing the gentle lap of waves on the lake, I felt more at peace than ever. I wasn't the girl who trembled under my parents' scorn anymore. I had a new life, simple but full of meaning, and a love that needed no conditions to exist. A year after our wedding, as autumn turned the trees around the Vermont lake to gold again, I unexpectedly received a call. On my screen was a name I hadn't contacted in a long time. Madison. For a moment I hesitated. Memories of all the times she mocked me, all the times she stood with our parents to erase me from the family picture, surged back. But then my heart tightened when I heard the choked sobs on the other end. "Gabriella." Madison's voice trembled. "Can I come see you?" Just a few hours later, Madison was at the door of our lakeside house. The haughty, polished look was gone. Her designer coat was wrinkled, mascara streaked her cheeks, her eyes vacant. When I opened the door, she collapsed, sobbing like a child. "You were right," Madison cried, each word breaking apart. "It was all just surface. My marriage, it's fallen apart." I helped her inside. Ethan was making tea in the kitchen. When he saw the scene, he nodded to me and quietly brought out 2 thin blankets. Madison curled up on a chair, clutching the hot cup, tears still streaming. "Bradley," she sobbed, "is under financial investigation. Turns out he hid debts and shady investments. The police came to the house. I've lost everything, Gabriella. The apartment, the car, the credit cards. All frozen." Bradley, the one my parents had celebrated as the perfect son-in-law, the man I was once compared to Ethan against, had collapsed in an instant. I looked at Madison, remembering all the times she proudly showed off a new handbag or bragged about luxurious trips as proof of happiness. And now in front of me was only a confused, shattered girl. "I'm so scared," Madison whispered, red eyes lifting to mine. "I have nowhere to go. Mom and Dad, they told me to deal with it on my own. They don't want any part of the investigation." Her words cut through me. I remembered being shoved out the door by our parents without a single protective gesture. Now they were doing the same to Madison. I took her hand, the hand once used to clasp glittering jewelry, now icy and trembling. "You have somewhere, Madison," I said slowly, "and it's here." Madison burst into tears again, collapsing on my shoulder, repeating over and over, I'm sorry. I was wrong." Ethan came over, set a hand on my shoulder, his eyes gentle but firm. He didn't need to speak, I understood. He supported me in opening my heart, the way we had once wished for from family. In the days that followed, Madison stayed with us. She slept in the guest room, a room where we kept a few books, a small desk lamp, and a warm wool blanket. At first she was awkward and used to a simple life, making her own breakfast, sharing chores, walking around the lake together. But gradually she began to smile when she joined us by the fireplace, or squeal with delight when Ethan taught her how to bake bread. One evening as I folded laundry, Madison sat beside me and asked in a small voice, "How did you not fall apart? When Mom and Dad abandoned you, when they compared you, when I and everyone else took their side." I looked into her eyes, no longer arrogant but truly empty. I answered, "Because I chose to build a life on love and respect, not appearances." Sometimes, rejection is a gift that helps you find your real family. Madison was quiet and then her tears fell again. But this time not from despair, more like relief, as if she had finally seen a new light. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling a strange peace settle in me. Maybe by welcoming her into our home today, I had done what our parents never did for me, offering a second chance, not with conditions but with love. That night, after Madison fell asleep in the guest room, I lingered on the porch looking out at the still lake. Moonlight stretched across the water and a soft breeze stirred the trees. I thought of everything I had been through, the contempt, the rejection, and the moment I found my real family, not by blood but through love, respect, and the doors that open when we choose generosity. Maybe sometimes rejection is the gift. It forces us to stand up, to rewrite our own story, and to see who truly deserves to stay in our lives. What about you? In my place, would you choose to forgive or let go completely to protect your heart? I truly want to hear your answer in the comments. If this story touched a corner of your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because here I'll keep sharing more stories about family, love, betrayal, and second chances, the real things in life where each of us can find a piece of ourselves. Thank you for listening to my journey. See you in the next story.